Most of us will never have to deal with anything like that in our lives, but for those who do, survival instincts force them to make changes. People choose to live in extremely unusual settings, either as a result of unfortunate and unpleasant circumstances, or simply because they are super creepy. Here, we'll take you on a tour of some of the most outlandish dwellings ever inhabited, whether by choice or necessity. To be more precise, it is a compilation of the most peculiar past habitations we could find. It's a quick illustration of how people shape and are shaped by their environments, and how those environments change in response to those people. The end of this list should drive home the point that humans are remarkably adaptable creatures, capable of thriving in a wide variety of environments. It's not hard to admit that you fantasized about escaping to a superhero's lair like Batman's Batcave, or Superman's shielded underground lair in the event of a nuclear attack. As we grow up, we become accustomed to society at large. Without further ado, let's take a look at some of the most out-of-the-ordinary abodes ever inhabited. 1. Living in a bomb shelter. There are others who should be afforded the luxury of a safe house in the event of a nuclear attack as well, not just the President of the United States. If you're just a regular person who thinks the typical house is boring, you might want one. What can you do now to get the feeling of being able to fire missiles and being safe from any kind of attack? A decommissioned bomb shelter would be available for purchase. Seeing as you probably don't have the wits to be President of the United States, but have plenty of cash on hand like Bruce Wayne, the federal government will gladly give you a decommissioned missile silo. If you have a few million lying around, you can buy a special superhero house that used to boast the ability to launch nuclear missiles. 2. Living in a shoe house. Perhaps you've heard the one about the elderly lady who lived in a shoe for a while. It sounds like the kids made up a silly rhyme. Why would a senior citizen choose to make her home in a shoe? Can water drain from a shoe? Electricity? Internet? And what do you think of Netflix? How does she manage to cram so many kids into such a tiny house? Why not put it to the test by purchasing your very own miniature shoe house, which surprisingly can be found for sale in many different countries? You might get some odd looks from your neighbors, but at least your home will be the most unique in the area. Houses can be found in both shoes and boots, so you can find one that sort of fits your aesthetic preferences. 3. Living in a closet-sized apartment. A video of 45-year-old Phyllis Cohen's Upper West Side apartment, which she called a shoebox, went viral and was viewed more than 10 million times, making Cohen an internet celebrity. If you're looking to buy or rent an apartment like this, an elderly woman can give you invaluable advice. The high cost of living, a lack of disposable income, or a sense of adventure could motivate you to consider renting one of these closet-sized apartments. You might find some helpful advice in Cohen's new ebook, 90 Lessons for Living Large in 90 Square Feet, or more. As soon as you step inside the apartment, the far wall slides down out of the way. This professional organizer has made it work in her apartment without a kitchen. 4. Living in a cave. You probably haven't given cave dwelling much thought unless you're Fred Flintstone or the leader of a major cult. It's no longer uncommon for people to live in caves who are otherwise well integrated into society. Individuals of all socioeconomic backgrounds can purchase cave dwellings. With a budget of up to $1.9 million, you can purchase one of these out-of-the-ordinary residences. An Arizona cave is available for purchase by anyone. The cave dwelling is a cool place to live because it provides all the amenities of today. From the outside, the cave does not look like much of a mansion, which is to be expected given that it is, in fact, a cave. However, with 3 bedrooms and roughly 37 acres, it is an ideal home for a single person or a family that values privacy while still enjoying the benefits of an ultra-modern G.I. Joe way of life. 5. Living somewhere quite dark. It might be strange to share your home with a corpse. Still, there are those who prefer not to be on their own. It's terrifying to think of them all by themselves. An elderly woman in Michigan, for instance, was so lonely and unknown that she kept the body of her dead roommate in her apartment for 18 months. Charles Ziegler, her roommate of many years, passed away suddenly from emphysema when he was in his late 60s. Instead of calling the police to report his death, his longtime friend and roommate Linda Chase sat him in a chair. This may sound like a horror movie, but she made sure the body was neatly cleaned and dressed. While watching NASCAR, she made small talk with the shriveled corpse. After Ziegler's death, she continued to cash his Social Security checks, leading to accusations of fraud. However, keeping his body was not her true motivation. Chase merely disliked being on his own. 6. Living in the jungle. Humans have the most potential to persevere when faced with adversity. A young Cambodian girl, aged 8 at the time of her disappearance, was found to have been surviving in the wild for the previous 19 years. Rakom Pinjing, originally from the Cambodian province of Ratanakiri, spent her teenage years living in the wilderness before being spotted by a villager as she emerged from the woods naked and tried to steal his rice. He said she looked like a hybrid of humans and animals. The investigation conducted by the police concluded that she was unable to communicate in any meaningful way. The scars on her arms were how her dad finally figured out who she was. She couldn't speak the language, and she would rather crawl around than walk like a civilized person. The idea that she should dress up was another one she vehemently opposed. At a later time, she ran away from the village and into the jungle. Some people question if the woman really was Rakom Penjing. Possible father didn't want to get a DNA test. 7. Living in a shopping mall. If the residents are creative types, life in a shopping mall could be a lot of fun. In 2003, Michael Townsend and a group of fellow artists began occupying a vacant unit in a Rhode Island mall. They managed to bring in about 2 tons of construction supplies and construct their studio inside the mall. A barrier made of cinder slabs kept the public from seeing inside this studio. Surprisingly, there was electricity in the room, and it came fully furnished. They were compelled to make use of the mall's restroom facilities. Michael and his fellow artists were able to live in the secret location for up to 4 years at a time, for as long as 3 weeks at a time without being discovered. After a while, they were able to adjust to the confines of their new home. After being caught, he pleaded guilty to the criminal charge of trespassing and faced up to 6 months of probation as a result. 8. Living on a mountainside in isolation. A journalist named Vasily Peskov wrote a book in 1994 called Lost in the Taida, in which he described the following incident. In 1978, a group of geologists exploring the Abakan Range in southern Siberia came across a family of 6 living on a mountainside miles from the nearest inhabitants. The Lykov family, who were persecuted for their faith but managed to escape in 1936, spent the next 4 decades holed up in a single room. The family did very well eating mostly vegetables like potatoes. Before their younger children learned to trap in the late 50s, they had gone without meat for a very long time. 3 of the Lykov kids all passed away within a few days of each other 3 years after they were found. In 1988, the father passed away, leaving behind only one child, Agafia, who lived alone on the mountainside for the next quarter of a century. 9. Living in a see-through house. In an age where people are increasingly concerned about their privacy, these see-through homes put the old adage to the test. Don't worry if you have nothing to hide. When you live in one of these homes, there is no such thing as privacy. This house is a nightmare if fingerprints on windows and mirrors drive you crazy. Congratulations, you have been invited to a hellish home if you can't relax or relieve yourself while knowing that someone is watching you. The House NA is one of the transparent homes. If you're looking for a completely transparent home, look no further than the House NA. The roughly 900 square foot building is a nod to the days when people lived in the branches of trees without walls. The home, designed by Via Architecture, stands out from others in the neighborhood. It can be found in the middle of the city, sandwiched between 2 regular structures. You can't run away now. 10. Living in a hobbit hole. It's safe to say that living in a hobbit hole is one of the most intriguing human endeavors ever. Before relocating to his hobbit hole, Dan Price had a very stressful job. The strange terror of life in a hobbit hole did not deter Dan or others like him from making the move there for practical and social reasons. Dan and his wife are originally from Oregon, so before he left, he helped his family relocate there. Then he set out on an adventure by himself to the state's rural northeastern regions, eventually making his way to the outskirts of town. He decided to settle down in a hobbit hole, so he constructed one. For the past decade, he has called his 80-square-foot underground dwelling, which resembles a basement home. Dan assembled this hobbit hole from salvaged building supplies. As you can imagine, it would be very boring if every neighborhood only had perfectly straight streets and identical houses surrounded by white picket fences. Some communities thrive in the unlikeliest of settings, defying our expectations and our wildest imaginings. Have I missed something? Don't forget to share your thoughts in the comments section below. To see more, please like and subscribe.